Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to show you guys a little piece of software called Dehancer, or Dehancer, depending on where in the world you live. Now, what Dehancer is essentially is a film emulation plugin, and it's both for video and for photo editing. Now, I'm not the world's best filmmaker, surprise, surprise, so I'm going to be showing you guys the photo editing plugin. Now, this is for, it's compatible with quite a few softwares, most notably Lightroom Classic, Photoshop, Affinity, and Capture One. You can make a workaround or use it as a plugin with other software or not officially supported software like DxO Photolab, which if I remember, I'll try and show you guys towards the end of the video. But I don't want this video to be super long. Now, Dehancer is an amazing little piece of software. I was fortunate enough for them to reach out to me to play around with it, see what I think of it. Now, there's quite a lot to think about. It's quite a beast of a plugin. So let's quickly go through some things. Who is it for? And we'll get to this again at the end a little bit. Essentially, it's for someone who, if you're really into film photography or making your images or getting that film look within your images. Now, there are so many tweaks and settings you can do within Dehancer that, I mean, I think sometimes at the end of the day, it'll be easier just to stick to film photography. On the other hand, film photography is time consuming, it's expensive, there's extra gear to buy, coming back to the expensive side, and it's just a whole different beast. What Dehancer allows you to do essentially is get that film look with your digital files. So you have a bit of the convenience of shooting digital, and then having the flexibility of getting that film look during post-processing. Now, I'm going to try and run through it as extensively as possible without being boring or having this video going on for hours. But I do encourage you guys to go have a look at Dehancer. I'll link it down in the description below, and reach out, check it out, see what you think. It's not cheap, but again, if you're someone who's really into film photography or getting that look, they are, I think, probably one of the best options out there. Now, I've used a few of the other programs as well, like DxO's Film Pack. What I like about Dehancer is the interface, and it works very, very well, and you really have a very, very fine level of control. That said, there was something else I wanted to say, actually. I forget. So as a lot of you guys know, or if you have watched any of my other videos, especially the weekly edit, you'll know I do love adding grain to my images. Now, this is also, you can do this within various levels of detail, or have various levels of control within different software programs. Within Lightroom, for instance, you can only add a very limited amount of, or add grain to a very limited extent. You can add grain, you can adjust the roughness as well as the size, and that's about it. Now, on something like DxO or in On1 Photo Raw, you can actually choose the film stock and then adjust the grain parameters from there. Where Dehancer takes it one level further, is not only can you choose the film stock, you can actually choose within a range of 3 stops how much you want to push or pull the film. So in other words, whether you shot a film at a specific ISO and then underexposed it or overexposed it, being push or pull essentially. On top of that, you can adjust not only the basic parameters like the grain, you can also adjust things like how it affects the final image in terms of the paper it would be printed on. You can adjust things like what's the term? How how the chemicals would interact in the darkroom. So in classic film development, you have the developer, the stopper, and the fixer, and you can adjust parameters how these chemicals would interact with one another, how that affects the color, and that's often in non-linear ways. But anyway, so there's a lot to talk about. Let's jump into the into the edit, and I'll try and give you guys a quick overview as much as is possible with this extensive plugin. Okay, so as you can see, I'm here in Lightroom. I've got just 3 images. Hopefully we can get through all of them. Now, before I actually jump into the edit, let me just quickly make something else, or tell you guys about something else. So Dehancer is a film emulation plugin. Now, they advise this as well, but it's best to do your base level corrections within the how do you say it, the host program. So in the main editing software that you're working from, whether that be Lightroom, DxO, Affinity, Capture One, etc., before you jump into Dehancer, so that most of the image parameters are within check. Colors you can mostly leave alone because that's essentially what the film brings to the image. Grain you can leave alone as well, obviously. So just be aware of that, and things like crop, etc. You can also do some of the after the fact, but it's best to do that before to the raw file because you have the most flexibility. Okay, so enough talking. Let's see if we can get to some to some doing. Okay, so I've got sticky fingers. I have got this image here of this yacht. All three images are actually from a recent trip to southwest Italy. Now this yacht was anchored off the coastline where we were, where our accommodation was, and I found it quite a classic Mediterranean scene. Excuse me. You know, this olive trees in the front, yacht anchored, and beautiful Mediterranean Ocean with the orange of the sunrise starting to creep up there. So the first thing I want to do to this image is crop it. So just to get that horizon level, and then bring that crop down, crop a bit of the sky out essentially, around about like that. And then just open the image up slightly by increasing the exposure, upping the shadows. I'm going to overdo it a little bit because I want to be able to have a bit more playroom within Dehancer itself. Now, besides that, I think I might actually increase the vibrance just no, I'm actually going to leave that alone. I'm going to increase the temperature just like that. So let's just see, so that was before, that's after, and that's all I'm going to do in Lightroom. I'm going to go back to the library module, right click, edit in Dehancer, and then it will ask you what you would like to edit. So we want to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, a TIFF file for highest quality, sRGB color space, which is important if you follow the setup instructions from Dehancer, 16 bits component or 16-bit depth, and 300 dpi. Okay, so while that opens quickly, just another quick point about the setup of Dehancer. I'm not going to go through it in this video because it's just going to make it unnecessarily long, but there is a bit of a setup process. It's not massively complex. This is something to be aware of when you do initially install the plugin to follow. So here we go. Once Dehancer opens, you have one workspace essentially. Along the top you can choose between presets, either saved ones like I have here, and you have some presets from the Dehancer team, as well as imported, etc., etc. And where you would start when you first open the program would be under films. Now before we activate the film profile, along the top here you can obviously hide those. You can go into the settings. You can reset or undo, reset the image, undo and redo, and then on the top right here you can enable clipping warnings. You can see in the shadows there, and you can also do a histogram along the bottom here, and you can view the image at 1:1, 100%, and you can do a before and after, which at the moment doesn't show anything because we haven't made any adjustments. And you can cancel and click OK. And then along the right hand side here, top to bottom, there is a myriad of adjustments. Now we'll go through them shortly. So first thing you want to do in Dehancer is you want to activate the film profile. So you click on this little checkbox here and you'll see the image change depending on what's selected here. Now under film type you have all films, and then you can select favorites, color negative, motion picture, color positive, black and white, instant, exotic, and cross. So there's a lot. I'm going to stick to the sort of well-known photo film stocks like color negative. You also have color positive, which is color slide film, and then you have black and white films. For this image, I'm definitely interested in enhancing the colors both in the water and in the sky. So I'm going to stick with color negative. And under profile, we have now your classic color negative films. It's obviously the currently famous Kodak stock. I used to shoot a lot of Fujifilm, so I'm going to go with something like Fujifilm Print 400. You can select it like I did in the drop down, or you can also cycle through them here to see how the image responds. That Fuji Color 100 is actually quite nice as well. I might stick with that. Changing my mind on the fly. So Fuji Color 100, and this is the push and pull like I spoke about. So traditionally, oh, this is going to be a it's already getting longer than I want. So traditionally, when you push or pull the film, so let me just get my bearings straight again quickly, because I used to do that a lot when I shot film back in the day. So generally, let's say you have a 400 ISO film, but you shoot it like a 200 ISO. So or you have a 200 ISO film and you shoot it like a 400 ISO. So you pretend it's a faster ISO than it actually is, which means you're actually underexposing the image by a stop. This could be due to lighting conditions, due to you want to have a faster shutter speed due to the subject matter, etc. What you would then do is take the film, go to the lab, and you say, listen, could you push this for me 1 stop, or could you push this for me 2 stop? If you shot the 200 ISO at like 800 ISO equivalent, they would then chemically develop the film as if it was with the knowledge that it's a 200 ISO, push process it as if it's an 800, and you would get an evenly or a well exposed film. Otherwise, if they developed the 200 ISO film as you shot it, it would be vastly underexposed by 2 stops. So Dehancer has this option to push or pull the particular film stock by 3 stops. So in this case, just with the default film stock applied, it's a little bit dark. So I want to pull it a little bit so that it sort of evens out in terms of the exposure, just a tad. And then the typical, so I'm going to quickly do typical workflow in Dehancer as recommended, and then we'll add some other things, or we'll go through the settings one by one as well. As I say, so you do they have like a suggested workflow, and then let's say at the end you can add settings to taste, so a bit like salt and pepper, like seasoning your food. So if we look on the right hand side here, so let's do a quick before after. We have so the source essentially means adjusting just some basic parameters from the source image. So now with the film stock applied, it's a little bit underexposed, so I'm going to enable my clipping warnings there, and then I'm going to just up the exposure ever so slightly, and temperature wise I'm going to warm it. So let's just cool it down. I like what it's doing to the water, but not to the sky. So I'm going to warm it up slightly. And tint, green, magenta. I'm going to take it slightly towards the magenta side. And then defringe and defringe radius is for chromatic aberrations. But this would have been fixed within Lightroom. And then from there, they say you typically would head to the expand setting. So this would be your black and white point. So let's enable that quickly. Now, depending on what the situation is, here you can see with the clipping warnings, the black point we can pull to the left to get a bit more legibility back into the darker areas with the blacks, and then the white point as well. Drag that to the right to bring it down, or to the left to open it up. So I'm going to open it up quite a bit. There we go. It starts about. So just there. So that's sort of a nice dynamic range within the image. And the next port of call within the suggested workflow would be the print settings. So where do we go here? Print down. Oh no, I'm too far down. Color, there we go. So we enable that, and then you have some stock, full paper stock, as well as sort of a neutral preset to choose here. So linear you would choose if you don't want the characteristics of the particular paper stock to influence the interaction between the colors, etc. of the image. So you can just adjust things like target white, exposure, tonal contrast, etc. So if we quickly look before, after, and then you can adjust aspects like target white. That's not available within linear. So it also depends on the paper stock you choose. So we chose the Fujifilm 3513 print, and then we can adjust target white. Now within the print setting as well, if things start to blur out, you have what's called the analog range limiter. Now, traditionally, with film, the transition between darker and lighter areas, so highlights, shadows, or midtones, and highlights, and vice versa, is a lot more analog, a lot smoother, not as abrupt or as rigid or as rough as in digital, if I can put it that way. So enabling analog range limiter also just gives you a little bit more of a expanded range within to work in. You can push these values a little bit further, and as you can see immediately there. So let's just disable that. Have a look at the shadows and the blown out highlights. So when I enable that, immediately you have a little bit more dynamic range in the shadows. The highlights are back in check, and now we can carry on adjusting this a little bit more and expose them from there to there. And this will typically throw off the color a little bit, depending on obviously the paper stock. Now, depending on what happened here, we can also go back to the expand module and adjust the black point and the white point just a tad. So we've come from there to there. It's already getting that sort of film look. And from here, because like I mentioned, it affects the color within the image. If we go to the color head and we enable that, that's not going to do anything, but it will shortly. So this is essentially like you would have under the enlarger in the darkroom. When you project the image onto the paper stock, you can also adjust for different color balance values. So self-explanatory, yellow, blue. So this is looking a little bit green actually. So I'm first going to go to magenta green, a little bit more towards magenta, a little bit more yellow in there. Let's pull it too far, see what that does. Yeah, it's a nice bit of warmth maybe. And then add a bit more red there. That's already looking better. And then we can also adjust shadow tone, midtones tone, and the high tone within the highlights. So let's just pull these too far, see what they do. So if we pull that to the left, shadows get very cool. Pull that to the right, adding a nice bit of warmth to that lower part of the image. I don't know if you guys can see that. And then midtones, the same thing. I'm going to pull that a little bit to the left maybe. Pull that too far, see what it does. It's actually leaving the shadows alone nicely and adding a nice bit of blue to the water there. And then highlights. Ooh, that's cooling down way too much. So I want to warm up those highlights. I want that sort of tangerine orange look within the sky. And preserve exposure is just a way of, so traditionally when you adjust these values, it would also affect the exposure. But with the setting within Dehancer, it keeps the exposure in check. And if you take that to the left, you'll see the exposure starts to change as well. So I like to leave that at 100%. And then impact is essentially like opacity slider. If you take that all the way to the left, there's no impact, and all the way to the right. And that's actually a very pleasing change there. So it's a nice bit of warmth in the front here in the trees. The water is nice and blue, and that sky is getting that orangey look, which I was after. So let's just have a quick look at the before, after, before, after. And yeah, so essentially that's sort of the standard workflow. If we quickly zoom into 100% here and look at a before, after, you can see the only thing we've done is color adjustments. Obviously film grain is, well, in film grain is a big part of the equation due to film being light constructed of light sensitive crystals, which is a light sensitive emulsion essentially. So I'm going to zoom into 100% because that's generally what I like to do. The sky, I'm going to let happen what happens. I want to have a look a bit in the detail in the foreground here. So in terms of grain, let me just quickly go to my reference here. What are we at? 23. Just hang in there. I mean, grain self-explanatory. I just don't want to give you guys the completely wrong info. Film grain, there we go. So, yeah, okay. So essentially what Dehancer has done, when we enable that, you can see it's quite strong. You have different presets to choose from. Now, within each profile or within each preset, you can select it and then you can also adjust it in a custom way. So in this case, 35mm ISO 50. Nice little amount of grain here in the foreground and the trees. Let's have a quick look at the sky. Not bad as well. Let's just zoom out quickly. And then if we go to custom, pretty self-explanatory, but there's some nice little features here we can have a quick look at. So interestingly, you can adjust obviously the size. Well, we can there we go. You can adjust the amount, so really bump that up. Is that going to go back to where it was? There we go. The resolution. So the resolution slider is essentially a little bit of like a cheat code for digital files. So if you keep it at 100, Dehancer will maintain all the detail that there was within the digital file. However, within film, the more grain there is, in reality, the resolution starts to drop off a little bit, so you can actually adjust that. So if we take that all the way to the left, you can see the image gets quite blurry. And if we just zero that out, it's sort of a good balance between grain and image resolution. And then on top of that, we can also adjust the grain within midtones, highlights, and color. And we can choose whether we want positive, negative, color positive, color negative grain, etc. And then analog or noise. So there's a lot of adjustability, but within these presets, you'll be pretty well served. So I'm going to stick to that one, and let's just quickly have a look at no grain with grain. And already that's looking like a very nice film photograph. Yeah, so there we go. So essentially that's sort of your default workflow within Dehancer. So just within those sort of few things we adjusted, you can see there's a lot of flexibility. And yeah, it's it does a very good job in my opinion. It's quite involved, as you guys can see. So yeah, it's up to you to check it out and decide if it's something that could fit into your workflow, that you would actually be willing to spend the time on. Interestingly, some people who I've read up on, some people who've actually tried the plugin almost said they gave up on film photography because this does such a good job of applying or getting that film look within the digital images, which gives you sort of the best of both worlds. You know, you have the digital files, then also the film look, which you have ultimate control over in the digital darkroom. So let's just quickly go through the other two images, if you guys want to stick around for that. So if we have a look here, that's before. So it's looking good, the image, but you know, it's very digital. And then, you know, with that yeah, film emulation adjustments applied, looking very classic there on the Mediterranean with that yacht. So I'm going to click OK, and that should take. Is it thinking? Yeah, it's thinking. So let's just let it think for a moment. Please. There we go. Okay, so we are back in Lightroom. What happened to my image? Ah, I've got a filter on. Where did it go? Huh. Ah. That is the TIFF file. Where's the raw file? Where did it go? Ah, there's the raw file. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's quickly get them back. So that was before, that was after. moving on to the next one. So we'll try and make this a bit quicker. Actually, no, it's not going to be quick. So again, we can do some basic adjustments here. We do the crop. Maybe take that down ever so slightly. And then exposure, shadows, bring the highlights down quite a bit. Temperature wise, it's not bad. Let's just see what automatic does. It actually just bring a little bit coolness into the shadows, quite bad. So that's Lightroom adjustments before, after. And now we're going to head into Dehancer. We're going to TIFF file, sRGB 16:300. Yes, please. Okay, so for this one we could, sorry, I forget which, which screen I'm talking to. So for this one, we're going to run through all the settings in Dehancer quickly. So yeah, it's going to be a bit longer, but yeah, I hope it's worth it. Okay, so as we open Dehancer here again, it has basically retained all our previous settings. So we're going to go up to the top here, reset, and now we have the image as imported from Lightroom. So starting from, as we did before, film profile, enable that. So for this particular image, this for me is looking very much like a black and white. So I'm going to go to black and white film stock, and I can select the profile here, or I can look at the little presets here. So there's some color tone film stocks here, so I'm going to stick with the pure black and white ones. So Ilford XP2 Super 400. Disable the clipping there. That's a pretty decent starting point. Again, let's look at the push-pull here. You can see it affects the colors ever so slightly. I like the highlights and shadows, sorry, and the zero value there. The adjustments were also quite well done in Lightroom, so don't need to push or pull too much. No, okay, so if we take it from the top quickly, source. So we can adjust exposure compensation. Maybe up the exposure a tad. We're not going to worry about the highlights too much at the moment because I'm going to bring them back into range a little bit later. I'll show you guys. Temperature and tint, not an issue with black and white. Defringe, chromatic aberrations, that was sorted in Lightroom itself. So in the film developer, so like I mentioned here, this is how the chemicals would have been interacted with each other, sort of the mix. So you can, this is very much fine-tunable, to personal taste. So contrast boost, less, more, and you can see it affects highlight and shadows differently. As I'm increasing this contrast boost, the shadows are getting nice and dark, but the highlights are still staying sort of, very, very nicely preserved. Gamma interacts with contrast boost in the way that the midtones are pushed into the highlights or into the shadows. Left there, color separation, black and white, so this is not going to be a concern. Film compression. So film compression, I'm just going to read up on this, or read it to you guys quickly, that I don't get this wrong. So film compression, so on negative film, clipping in the highlights occurs much later than on a digital camera. So this essentially is like the analog range limiter down here in the print tab or module. So this basically, carrying on from what I was reading, to emulate the film-like compressed tonal range, Dehancer invented the film compression tool. So it lets you fine-tune the redistribution of the highlights. The resulting image looks more analog and becomes more flexible for further manipulation with exposure, contrast, and film print profiles, etc. So I'm going to enable this and have a look at the highlights on the ocean here and in the sky here in particular. And you can see immediately it's like magic. They just the highlights sort of becomes more, gets more detail, and there's a lot more information there. And then we can further adjust that, because with traditionally with film, like I mentioned, that the transition between highlights and shadows was a lot more smoother, more analog. It was more not chaotic. It was more random in a way, but also much more pleasing to the eye. Whereas in digital files, it can often be quite abrupt and not so pleasing. So impact, again, we can increase or decrease that. White point, it's pretty self-explanatory. So to the left, white point's going to increase. To the right, it's going to bring that more down. And tonal range, so this essentially represents the width of the tonal range within the image. Again, to the right, to the left, sort of increases the tonal range. To the right, to the left, sorry, to the right brings it more into check. And color density, we are not going to be too concerned about, because since it's a black and white image. But let's just look at the magic quickly, what this actually little module did. So that was the highlight area here before, after, and let's have a look on the water before and after. And now immediately actually getting to the next module, which is expand, which is the black and white point, that gives us more range to work with, to adjust between highlights and shadows, or whites and blacks within the image. So again, we take black point to the left, it's going to open it up. I want to take it a bit to the right because I really want this to be a punchy black and white. And the white point, let's just quickly enable. Okay, so it seems I've pushed the black point a little bit farther. Okay, no, still, I'm actually going to leave that off. It interferes with my judgment. And then with the white point, so the shadows I'm not too concerned about. The blowing out of the highlights I might be a tad concerned about. So I'm going to take the white point to the left and see how far I can push it. There it starts to blow out. To about, not push it too far, just about there. So let's just have a look. That's it. Before, after. So even though it's quite dark in the shadows, we can still see what's happening there. The highlights are still there. We see the little boat there. And we've come, okay, it's going to be the color version, but yeah, we've come quite far. And I love the way those highlights are looking. Carrying on then quickly, within the print medium, so like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I made a lot of sense. So optical printing is the last stage, within the analog film process. You develop the film, and then at the end you make a print. So being the last stage, as a result, that the paper that you print the image onto also has an effect in terms of the contrast range, how the colors interact or get represented, depending on the paper stock, like a film stock when you originally shoot the image. And that is essentially what this is. You can also bypass this. It's not essential to add, but if we enable that, I'm not sure what effect it's going to have here on the black and white image. Okay, yeah. So you can see different paper stocks also put forth or represent or display blacks and whites in a different way. So this Fujifilm 3513 print film paper has a very bluish tint to it, and the Kodak one is a bit more sort of almost like a warm black. The Indura glossy paper is like even a slightly more warm black. You can also choose Cineon, ooh la la, that's something completely different again. And then you can adjust values here. So essentially, it's a bit like soft proofing in Lightroom and in DxO Photolab. You would have to make additional adjustments based on the paper you're going to print on. But if you're not going to print, you're not, you don't have to worry about this too much. So let's deactivate that for now, just to sort of keep things in check time-wise and information-wise. Then color head, like I mentioned, so how can I frame this? So that's essentially based upon the analog color correction tool that used to be integrated into photo enlargers, which you would put the negative into, the light would be projected through it onto the paper that you're printing on. Now in Dehancer, the color head tool essentially represents the three complementary color pairs, CMY and RGB within within these analog developers, color heads within the developer, which is basically like a big thing with a light at the top that the light shines the negative in, and you can adjust these as to taste. Like I did a bit in the previous image with the color cast that we corrected. I'm not sure again. I'm not 100% sure how this effect is going to have. Okay. So it's almost like split toning on a black and white image within Lightroom or DxO, etc. It still has a color effect to a degree. So you can add a bit more yellow, a little bit more blue, In this case, actually, a little bit blue, not opposed to that. Magenta, green, definitely not. Cyan, red, no thank you. And again, we can adjust shadows here, a bit cooler maybe. So I'm not a big fan of adding any sort of color tinge or tone to my black and white images. I want pure blacks and pure whites. So not a major change here, but it seems to have actually helped a bit with achieving that. Film grain, spoke about that. So interestingly, sorry, I just enabled that. So film grain within Dehancer, what they've done is they have they've created grain profiles by actually scanning the how do you say the different film profiles, and then reconstructing the image to an extent so that the image actually is presented or constructed out of these grain particles, and they also interact in a very dynamic way. Yeah, so the film grain is not just overlaid onto the image like it is in many other programs. It's also, the image entirely consists of grain, like I mentioned. So I'm just reading this as I'm forgetting what I want to say. So it says Dehancer literally reconstructs the image using the local color and brightness characteristics along with a complex physical modeling of a film emulsion, which they've gone and scanned in and analyzed, etc. Christ, this is getting long. So enable the grain, we spoke about that before. Let's zoom into 100%. You can see there's a nice bit of grain there, which is quite nice within a black and white image. Again, to ISO 250. Let's go there. So as we move down in terms of focal length, so 8mm, etc., it's going to get less in terms of resolution. So if we go back up to 35, so it gets a bit more resolution. Where's the boat? There we go. 250. There we go. 65 more ISO 50, slightly finer grain. I like that. So let's leave it at that. And then let's just zoom into 100% again. So we have highlights, we have shadows, and then if we go to custom, we can adjust how much the grain affects the highlights, the shadows, and the midtones over here. Okay, so let's see. So in the highlights, let's take the grain a little bit away, and then in the shadows, you can see it starts to disappear there. But I like it there. I'm going to leave it at default, or maybe take it back a tad. Increase in the midtones. There we go. Okay, so that is grain. Let's just see it before, after. Perfect. And okay, so moving on to halation and bloom. Now these two tend to interact if memory serves. So halation, essentially, I think it's more to do with video, with film, moving pictures. So halation is the film emulsion effect visible as the local red-orange halos around the bright light sources. Well, that's actually more applicable in the next image. Specular highlights, contrasting edges. Also, halation may produce a well-pronounced red glare in the midtones, mostly affecting the skin tones. So I don't think it's going to have much of an effect on this image, being black and white. Now, bloom is essentially that sort of soft glow around the highlights, or areas of high contrast where highlights change into shadows. So essentially, it's like the combined effect of light dispersion on the boundaries, contrasting image areas. Sorry. So and which originates within the optical system, so within the lens itself, and is amplified in the emulsion layers of the film. Now, bloom has little in common with optical soft effects, as it appears only around light sources, so highlight areas. Again, let's just, so you can see what happened there in this highlight area as well as this part in the clouds as well. I'm just going to disable that. So you can see there's quite a hard transition between the clouds and the highlight here, as well as between this sunspot and the darker areas. But when we enable bloom, it sort of just bleeds into each other a little bit better, a more sort of pleasing transition between the two. And again, you can customize this to your heart's content. I'm gonna not do that right now. And some of the last 3 aspects, as this video is heading into the 40-minute mark. It's probably just me, myself, and I still here. Drop a comment if you are as well. So, film. Let's just quickly go back to the preset there. There we go. I quite like that actually. So bloom combined with the, what was it? Film compression. Beautiful in terms of bringing that film vibe to the image. So then next up we have film damage. Pretty self-explanatory. I enable that and you can see a massive amount of film damage. A nice thing is when you click refresh, it sort of randomly refreshes the effect. And again, you have different types of presets you can choose from. That first one is quite strong. So if we stick to 35mm full frame, and again you go to custom, you can customize from the hairs, which would be these little squiggly things, the amount, the scale, the size balance, the white black balance, the scratches, which would be the straight lines. Typically when we pull the film over the develop reel, or out of it, or out of the develop tank for that matter. And also the overall total amount, global opacity, etc. Yeah, so very cool. I'm gonna leave it on the preset and I'm gonna disable that. I don't want that in this image. Overscan is where you would traditionally have, when you would scan the image, you would scan more of just the actual frame within the negative, and you can adjust the crop afterwards when you make the print. So it gives you a bit more flexibility, and it's more of an artistic effect. So, and again, you can adjust a lot of different things here. You guys can go through that in your own time. It does have quite a nice little adds a nice little vibe to this black and white image actually. And then lastly, vignette, the classic vignette. Again, you can adjust this. So I'm going to take the feather down so you can see where it is, the exposure as well. And then I'm going to adjust aspect ratio so that it's more sort of suited to a landscape image. And then I'm going to take up the size to push it out. Now this vignette, again, this is more based on the lens, because in the film days you won't be able to adjust the vignette more towards the upper corner or anywhere else in the image. It would just be around the center, so that's not an option here. You can adjust the size, however, and then take the feather back up and push that size out, and then exposure wise bring that down ever so slightly, and then we have the vignette. Okay, so that's the black and white edit. I'm going to click OK. Should take it back into Lightroom. And it's not black and white. Why is it not black and white? Ah, there we go. So, original image, black and white image. And we have that beautiful film grain and that analog highlight, and as well as transition between highlights and shadows. Are we going to do this last image? I think not. Maybe I'll do that. I'll do that in another video actually. This is getting very long. The last thing I want to say, firstly, before I say the last thing, I want to say thanks for sticking with me. A long one, but yeah, I mean, I don't see how I could have made that any shorter. I wanted to give you guys a quick run through of the whole program, show you all the different parameters you can adjust, so you can do a lot. You can really do a lot. Now, Dehancer also has an amazing little mobile app for your iPhone. It gives you all the same adjustability to your images straight in the palm of your hand, so check that out if you want. Now lastly, before I end this, just quickly, so like I mentioned I think in the beginning, it's been so long I've actually forgotten what I said in the beginning. But maybe I should just, so to reiterate, who is this for? If you're really into getting that film look and want the ultimate customizability, this is definitely for you. You can spend hours adjusting different things to get that perfect film look or analog look. Would I use this personally? To be honest with you, if I had all the time in the world, absolutely. It's such a nice program to play with, and that the the ways that they're sort of bringing this to life, in, but staying true to the film ethos in a sense is really amazing. On a practical level, someone like myself who does not have all the time in the world to spend on editing my images, if you watch my other videos, one of my big sort of philosophies is to spend this little amount of time editing images. Maybe not, but that said, I think once you get practiced with Dehancer, you can save presets, and then when you open up images, you can quickly apply those presets. So you know how you shoot your images, whether it's a portrait, a landscape, lighting conditions. You will quickly develop a nice suite of presets, which, as I'm saying this, I might actually do, because I really like the way that it brings that film look to life. Okay, so yeah, if you have watched the whole thing, you deserve a medal. If you have anything to say, drop it down in the comments below, and let me know if you would like me to do some more stuff with Dehancer, or sorry, okay, no, I'll do that in another video as well, actually. Sorry. Okay, let's end this. Can't do everything in the same video. Cool, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.